Welcome. I am really excited. We have a great group, bigger than last time, which is awesome. This is going to be a really special conversation. Start off, I'm Todd Sullivan, CEO of Exitwise. Exitwise, where we help business owners create the exits that they truly deserve. That is our mission. Today, I'm joined by Jason Bornhorst, who's one of our exited founders. And if you don't know how we define exited founders, please go to our website. You can see over 100 of them. Jason really understands how to build and leverage strategic relationships that end up creating successful exits. So we're going to hear a bit about that today. Jason's built and sold multiple companies. We're going to hear about 3 of them and the playbook that he uses to make sure that he has the right relationships in place to either trigger M&A or have trusted partners to sell companies to when things aren't going as well. I think this is the part that every founder really needs to lean into and listen to, is that a strategic partner can not only be the top buyer, in an auction process because they know what they're getting, you're a known entity, but also they may be the only one at the table, right, if things aren't going as planned. So today, we're going to talk with Jason. We're going to break down his entrepreneurial journey. We'll talk about the strategic relationships, how he created them that led to 3 exits to some big names, Expedia, one of them, and how CEOs really should be thinking about and planning for M&A as part of their full-time roles. Before we jump in, like I said, please check out the Exited Founder Marketplace. This is where business owners can really learn from, work with people that are similar to Jason, maybe in your specific industries. They've been in your shoes, they've taken the same risks, they've built value, they've closed life-changing exits, and they're really here to mentor their fellow business owners through the M&A process. So if you're thinking about this, or you're thinking about an exit someday, please check it out. Maybe you have inbound interest. They can be incredibly helpful in those types of conversations. So hopefully this conversation really fundamentally changes the way you think about M&A. Jason, thank you for being here. Let's jump in, huh?
That sounds awesome. Thank you for the introduction.
Well, I don't know if I properly introduced you. Maybe what we really should do is let you grab the mic, maybe give a little background, start with, how you became an entrepreneur, and we'll jump into each of these exits and we'll focus on those, strategic partnerships, anything you really want to teach.
Yeah, for sure. So guys, super awesome to be here. Been working with Exitwise a couple of months now, and Todd kind of nailed why I'm involved in Exitwise and why I'm here today. Sold my last business about a year ago, and it's been super rewarding to spend time with founders, either informally or formally via things like Exitwise, just to kind of get a sense of like, hey, where's the business at? How can we grow it? And ultimately, how can we tee it up for the right exit at the right time? That's been very fulfilling to me, and hopefully we can share a little bit of things I've learned along the way and make this engaging for you guys. Just to add some additional context on myself, I am 39, father of 3 boys, live in Austin, Texas. And as Todd mentioned, been doing startups basically since college. So went to school in engineering, minored in entrepreneurship, and had the fortunate experience to build and sell a business, a very tiny one, but a sale nonetheless, when I was still in college. And I was like, holy cow. Like, I can actually make a go of this. And I've been doing startups basically ever since. I have spent almost all of my career in regulated software markets. So things like travel, healthcare, benefits. I'll get into sort of the why of that strategy if we cover it, but know that that's kind of my context. So a lot of enterprise sales, a lot of B2B, a lot of complicated software that also sits on complicated regulations. And the sort of playbook and all of that has been, hey, let's go in and find something that everybody hates, and let's find out how to make it beautiful, and let's find out how to be experts in that space. And that's been a pretty reliable way to make value, both just in a general sense, but also in an M&A sense. So that's me. And we'll definitely cover some stories on the various exits that I've had. One went right, one went fine, what I wish I would have done better. And all throughout, I've been doing kind of what we'll come to talk about as acquisition engineering. So sort of my belief that the CEO should be spending a little bit of their time, probably about 5%, just kind of paying attention to what an exit outcome might be and how to tee that up at the right time. So Todd, I'll flip it back to you and take us where you want to go.
I feel like you just outlined about 9 podcasts or webinars for us. You've got so much to share. I think the regulation, the industries with intense regulation is a really interesting topic. But I think let's start with maybe that first company that you built and sold. I'm always such a proponent of, if you can get one M&A event, one exit under your belt early, how you see the world of entrepreneurship, that journey, you see it differently and things get a little easier. Maybe start there, and then let's jump to, I think we talked about covering three,
Mhm.
two great ones and one that was kind of saved you, it sounded like.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So the first experience I'll share is a business called Mobiata. This was about 7 to 10 years or so ago. And so I want you guys to picture the kind of rise of mobile, right? So Apple had just launched the App Store, Android was just behind. And we had a business called Mobiata, actually ran out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we were doing mobile apps to manage your travel. So our very first product was an app called Flight Track. It was an app on iPhone and Android to track your flights. We followed in short succession with an app to find and book hotels, and then also did general trip management. Now, Mobiata was a direct-to-consumer business principally. So we were a bootstrap company, grew to several million in run rate pretty much overnight. And that was all through D2C acquisition. So people would just buy our apps in the App Store. They were delightful experiences. They'd tell their friends. One of the most interesting things I remember about Mobiata is we could never spend money on marketing because it was nowhere near efficient compared to just word of mouth growth. And so actually for the lifetime of Mobiata, we just never spent money on marketing. It just never worked. Everything was just like right place, right time. And honestly, I've been kind of searching for lightning in a bottle like that ever since. And so Mobiata went from sort of zero to acquisition by Expedia in just about 3 years. And so ultimately what happened with Mobiata is Expedia bought that business. And it became Expedia's mobile division, which I led product for about a year or two before departing and starting my subsequent company. And the timing of this couldn't have been better. So, again, mobile was underway for a couple of years. A lot of the big organizations in travel were sort of experimenting with it, seeing if it's something they wanted to bet on. And by the time Mobiata was acquired, it was extremely clear that mobile was where travel was going, if not every industry was going, and they needed to be in fast. And we represented a known team, a known leadership team, a known set of technology that let them get into that industry as quickly as possible. And fun fact, the Expedia mobile app in large part is still Mobiata technology today. So it largely hasn't changed since the acquisition, 7 to 10 years ago.
Okay. Awesome story. Lightning in a bottle, right? To me, when we talk about timing, right, I think it's important. This is early days on the App Store, right? So getting distribution for that app direct to consumer, which would be incredibly expensive just, 3 years later, you were able to kind of take advantage of that. So you're building that up. But at what point did you create a relationship? At what point was your app so valuable to multiple players in the travel space, like an Expedia? So talk about that, and then why Expedia? Where did that kind of handshake get stronger?
Yeah, so what was interesting about Mobiata is, remember, we started D2C and the business was principally D2C, but along the way we decided, hey, you know what? We're kind of hearing from a lot of these enterprise travel companies, think big airlines, big online booking agencies like an Expedia, all trying to kind of get their feet into mobile. And we said, you know what? Why don't we license our technology as a white label platform for these entities? And we did just that. So Mobiata had a number of accounts where the very first mobile app from sort of big travel names that you guys probably know was actually Mobiata technology under the hood. And this was the reason that we knew Expedia, actually. So we were out there in market. We were out there selling a commercial offering. It gave us a reasonable reason to go knock on everybody's door, make sure they knew who we were. And we also got business from that. So a significant part of our revenue was powering mobile apps for these businesses. And I think that was pretty smart in retrospect. When it came time for the large travel brands to kind of make their stake in mobile, a lot of people very naturally knew Mobiata. We were probably already powering their app. They had experience with our team. And if they weren't yet a customer, they certainly know who we were from the commercial pitches and work that we had been doing.
Okay, so that's fantastic. You start out with the direct to consumer product, you see an opportunity B2B. Are they doing the reskinning, right? Is it something that you handhold them through? Like each partner is treated separately? How did that growth happen?
Yeah, so the way the platform part of the business worked is it was Mobiata technology that sort of ran the flight tracking or the hotel booking. And then we also built in like a white label machinery. So like people could just drop in kind of logo, brand assets, it would white label, and we'd get something to market really, really quickly. And then we could kind of further customize, but on top of our stack. And this was a great business model, was easy to stand up and was just a good revenue line for the business. But from the point of view of future acquisition, also made a ton of sense, because if you're Expedia and you're trying to get into the mobile market quickly, it's very easy to make the case that, hey, if we buy Mobiata, not only do we have a great team, a great consumer distribution, but they frankly already figured out half of the white label work we're going to have to do to get something in market. And so like you can just kind of imagine the internal executive briefing that was put together to justify the acquisition. And so much of the sort of inherent parts of Mobiata's business sort of made that case, I think, really easy to say yes to if you're the leadership team at Expedia kind of debating how you want to allocate capital.
It's an incredible strategy. I've built and sold a couple of businesses myself, and on 3 of them, 50% of my revenue came through these strategic partnerships, and they all raised their hand at the end. And so what I want to touch on is Expedia has to value you a little differently. You use the word justify, right? They have to say, okay, all of this may be B2B revenue. It may go away because now this becomes our mobile competitive advantage. We're bringing the whole team in. I don't know the kind of inner workings of that, but can you talk about how do you structure the right deal with a strategic partner when the value to them is beyond, a simple financial multiple?
Yeah. So interestingly, in Mobiata's case, remember this was 7-10 years ago. Fast forward to today. In fact, all of Mobiata's existing business has been shuttered. So the D2C component no longer exists. All the partnership work no longer exists. As you can imagine, the leverage to just having Mobiata's team focus exclusively on Expedia work is significantly higher in comparison. And so, yeah, Todd, you're probably right. When they were putting the deal thesis together, yeah, we had a couple million of revenue in these various lines. They were probably planning at Jump Street to wind those things down over time and just double down on the work to Expedia. And that's okay. I think from a founder's perspective, you sort of need to have a good sense of like, why is someone buying this? Like, put yourself in their shoes. Imagine writing the deal memo that they're writing to justify the acquisition. Like what is going in there? Because that's ultimately how they're coming up with acquisition values. And in many cases, certainly in my case, when you do deals with strategics, it's very rarely linked to the financial metrics and probably a lot more often linked to strategic value. So like the notion that like Expedia has this huge distribution network, mobile's coming online. How much money could they make if they had a mobile capability? And how much money could they make if they had that mobile capability now versus, say, waiting 1 year to build it, and then the risk of them building it and missing on execution, right? So there's a lot of like expected value calculations that come in here. So we can go deeper, but that's the gist.
No, dead on, right? I think there's a real a teaching moment here when you said, you got to put yourself in that buyer's shoes, because a great banker, a great process, they will say, what is this asset truly worth to you? And when you move beyond the multiple, some financial multiple of your revenue or EBITDA, and it gets into that strategic realm, kind of the curtain opens of how are you going to leverage this? And you have to see a couple years down the road and really convince both parties that, yeah, maybe the core business that I built is going to be shuttered, but ultimately the value to this single acquirer can be enormous. And I think there's a real talent in that. It's admirable that you were able to create these kind of options with a D2C and a B2B strategy. Is there anything else that you would pull out of that transaction that you would want to share?
I think the thing that comes to mind is it is very helpful for founders kind of thinking about M&A or maybe getting into an M&A process. It's really helpful to put yourself on the other side. So like imagine you're the champion buying the business, literally write the deal memo, like attempt to write it. And if you can, maybe even attempt to build a pro forma for a couple of years, like make some simplifying assumptions, because having a good sense of why someone's valuing it and how much money they stand to make gives you a lot more understanding and potentially negotiation leverage when putting a deal together, right? So strategic acquisitions, they have this unique facet in that like what's the right price? Well, it could be huge, and it depends entirely on the time, place, and situation. And that's where like this sort of mechanic is, I think, really helpful.
I think just to add to that, it's also the parties involved, right? So if you've done that exercise, and I don't know who the CEO was or the head of product or whoever was your champion driving this forward at Expedia, was Dara the CEO at that point?
Not at that point, I
Okay.
don't
So
think. Yeah.
regardless, when you have that conversation, because I have literally sold businesses for business owners, and I've gone to the CEO of the platform, even though it's owned by private equity, and I've said, if you model it this way, forget about all the financials, you're going to see an incredible outcome. So you're kind of giving them a strategy. You're giving them a reason to say, I don't frankly care that much what I pay for this. Does this make my business better? Am I de-risking it? Is this the right person? So when you're having those conversations, because you had strategic partnerships, you could have those conversations. Then
For sure.
you're modeling just strategic outcomes.
And just to insert, like, remember the topic of today's conversation is the long game of M&A, right? So like the Expedia relationship started years prior, and it's our understanding of their business that allows us to start having intelligent thoughts about what 1+1 could equal. And like at the most advanced levels, there's almost like even inception here. It's entirely possible for the entrepreneur to have a stronger idea of where it could go and sort of incept that into the buyer in a way that makes it feel like it was the buyer's idea. And like, but just in nothing else, like just imagine you were buying a company. Wouldn't you want the person you're buying to have a really good understanding of your business? Because chances are you're going to be working together for a long time. Like that's who I'd want to buy, right? So the reverse is true.
All right, why don't we jump to the next one? Which direction do you want to go?
Let's go to the next one. That sounds great.
Okay, so lay it out for us. What the name of the business and
For sure.
yeah.
So coming off of Mobiata, started a second business in pretty short order. This business was called Patient.io. We were a venture-backed business that did care coordination work in the healthcare space. And so what I mean by that is picture a sick patient. They're getting discharged from a hospital or a long-term care center, what have you. Back 7-10 years ago, that was a lot of paperwork. So like, here's a bunch of paper at your discharge instructions. I'm going to make a reminder to call you every couple of days to check in, these types of things. We digitized that process. So now we had something called a digital care plan. So this would allow the care team of the patient and their family to sort of all act together as a team. And that was Patient.io's business. We were an enterprise business, so we built software that other entities in healthcare would use. And pretty quickly, about a year or two in, we attracted the attention of Athena Health, who is a big player in the healthcare space. They do medical record and billing for probably 15% of the country, plus or minus. And I sort of made it my personal mission to get to know the CEO because I felt that there was a lot of affinity. And I can talk about how I did that, but once I got to know him, we ultimately established them as what became our biggest customer. So we were giving software to Athena. They were paying us for that software. We worked together for a whole year, had a fantastic experience working together. And as part of that, they actually made a minority investment into Patient.io. So they were a small investor on our cap table, served as an observer on our board. And when it came time to raise a Series A for Patient.io, we were getting a lot of offers. And right before we sort of truly went to market on Series A, I sort of tipped my hand a little bit to Athena. I said, hey guys, we're getting a ton of traction on this Series A. You guys know us well. You're an observer on the board. You can see that. I'm just kind of giving you a courtesy heads up that I'm going to kick this off soon, and I expect it to close quickly. And once it closes, if there's any interest in owning us, it's probably a lot more accessible now than it would be post Series A. Because post Series A, those investors are going to have their own expectations. We're going to have another couple years of building to achieve it, and so the business effectively is sort of no longer for sale for at least a period of time. And given that we had known Athena Health really well, I just simply had a little conversation over a beer with my champion. I mean, probably no more than 6 minutes expressing that sentiment. And about a week later, we had an LOI in my inbox. And then that was in striking distance, negotiated that. And then within about a month or two, closed that deal really quickly, really cleanly. And a lot of that had to do with just pre-existing relationships. We knew them well. We were working with them in a way like the acquisition was almost just tying up kind of a lot of things that already felt natural and true, if that makes sense.
You know, there's so much here, and I want to be respectful to the audience to stay on topic. But you quickly start another company. You're going B2B entirely this time. You're now in healthcare. You're taking on additional difficult challenges, right? And we know like M&A gets or building a business, we think gets a little easier once you have a win under your belt. So I have like a whole bunch of questions there, but I think what is really interesting is you create this strategic partnership with Athena. You immediately know I'm going to meet this CEO and I'm going to create a relationship here. You're getting to understand the business, how they value your product, how they use your product. But I think the part of the playbook of that sale is maybe you could, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You talk about it, how fundraising and M&A can kind of parallel each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I would drop is as like a teaching moment is I find that buyers get excited when you say something like, we just received interest, whether it's fundraising interest or M&A interest. And you and I know each other pretty well. I think you're a better home for us than who's courting us at the moment. Is that a conversation you would like to have? Because if I go down this route, certain doors start to close, right? And so it's that fear of missing out, it's the takeaway, and it naturally drives constructive conversation. So when I back up, I hear like that is the playbook. All right, so let me hand it back to you, and you talk us through it.
So one thing that emerges for me, so when we talk about Patient.io, we were an enterprise software business. So clearly we're out there in market doing enterprise sales. We had a small sales team, myself included as CEO. And a way that I used to think about the pipeline back then is I was just as much on the sales team as any other, but the deals that I would own were ones that were particularly important from either like, hey, this is just a great revenue opportunity, let's go get it. But secondly, hey, this might be a company that might want to buy us someday. Like, this is a great way for me to go get to know those people and or land a deal. And thirdly, hey, this might be a business that might want to place a strategic investment. Another reason why, as a CEO, I might want to own that deal. And so through that commercial lens, I mean, I probably knew personally 30, 40 business leaders in our direct segment over a couple of years that I had went out and cultivated. And again, all through commercial lenses, but built those relationships along the way. And the Athena Health CEO was a good example of that. That was a reason that I had like particularly targeted and reached out and gotten to know him. And lo and behold, that became a reason why the company was acquired. And then Todd, to the question you asked, when framing it the way that I did, like, hey, as a trusted business partner, as a trust relationship, I'm doing you a service of letting you know some things I'm thinking about so that you have an opportunity to react before other people do. From their perspective, that's actually awesome. That's probably the most respectful thing I could have done. It empowers them with information to act first and just lines everything up so nicely. Contrast that to the alternative. Imagine I just approach someone cold. Maybe I'm like, hey guys, like, things are working, but not great. Like, I'm kind of looking for an exit. Will you please save me? And regardless of the words you use, like, people can read between the lines and pick that up. And so it's really important. One of the best things founders can do is maintain momentum. And that's across all aspects, fundraising, M&A, et cetera, so that it allows you to enter conversations in the method that we just described with Athena Health. And so I think that's a great takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much insight in there. Can I just ask one question before we jump to the next one? You made the decision to take investment from Athena Health at an early stage, and you saw that as strategic. In M&A, we would also see that as, well, you're kind of picking your buyer because will often get more data than the rest, the other buyers, and other buyers might say, well, Athena's on your cap table. Like, they're just going to bid, $5 more and I'm going to lose this. So I'm not going to spend the time. How did you think about taking dollars from them, not knowing that they would ultimately be the buyer?
Yeah, so I think this one is situation dependent. Whether this is a good idea for you depends on your industry, depends on the context. For my money, I have always been a fan of little small strategic tracking checks. It's a great way to get to know someone. It's a great way to give them a little inside look into how you work. And part of the reason we decided to take that money from Athena is at the time I was like, hey, I think there's actually a decent chance Athena Health is a good home for this business, especially if we choose to sell it before raising the Series A. And for those reasons, the sort of pros outweighed the cons,
Great.
I would say.
Thank you. And I just want people to understand, if you're going to run an M&A process and you've got a banker and you see that buyer list, if there are 3 or 4 on that list that personally, just what you said, Jason, Don't let the banker make that call. Give them a heads up, right? It is the respectful thing to do. It is leaning on the relationships, and often those groups will raise their hand and surprise you. So it is people treating people the right way. Can create great outcomes. Let's jump to the next one. I think there are a lot of learnings here, and I also want to get to kind of your tidbits. I know there's a 5% time that we want to touch on.
For sure. So the next story we'll talk about is, so after we sold Patient.io, stayed on with Athena for a couple of years, had a total blast, left and said, hey, you know what? I think it's time for the next thing. And we started a business called First Dollar. First Dollar was also venture backed, and we built software for benefits administration. So folks might be familiar with health savings accounts, FSAs, HRAs, various acronyms. We built software to administer those accounts. So we sort of sat on a bank. We managed money for individuals, had about a 5 or 6 year run building pretty sophisticated software doing this. And ultimately, First Dollar was acquired by a private equity-backed large benefits provider. And that acquisition closed just 1 year ago. And they have since sort of doubled and tripled the team. And I would not be shocked if First Dollar technology is running about a third of benefit administration in the country, that they're going to have a whole lot of success with it. And so that was the story of First Dollar. And I think one thing worth teasing out is, interestingly, kind of in the middle of our life cycle, we actually got some unprompted attention from a rather large business on acquisition. Ended up spending an entire year cultivating that deal. Tons of on-site trips, tons of diligence, like really seemed like an exciting, great fit. And on the final hour of that deal, it fell through. And that's a learning, guys. It happens sometimes. I mean, for a whole year, I was like, this thing's going to happen. And then it didn't. And that happens for normal reasons all the time. Companies that buy companies are large inner working creatures, and sometimes priorities just change. I mean, frankly, there was probably a 10-minute conversation at the executive level where it was like, thanks for all that research, guys. We're going to do this instead. That just happens. And so I think the lesson for entrepreneurs is like, appreciate that that's the case. And it's a good reason to have a background thread on M&A going, even if you think you might have something that kind of feels like a sure thing. Because in our case, because I had done that background work and I had a set of relationships beyond kind of where our primary focus was, we were able to put a deal together when the business needed it, at the time that the business needed it. And we got an acquisition done nonetheless.
Jason, I think it brings up the point of, an M&A team and who's doing what, right? So you're a little bit of an unusual case here where you're carrying the bulk of this load while running a company. And I discourage that because you need to keep your eye on the ball with the business. I love how you kind of said, positioning the company for exit, it falls through. Well, now you're exit ready. Right? So you know exactly what you're going to go through with this business. Man, I have so many questions with you because now you've jumped into fintech, right? So going from travel to healthcare to fintech. I guess I don't have a great question other than talk to me about the first attempt at M&A fails. Are you in a position now where the business is feeling stress and you need to, find an outcome sooner than later?
Yep. Yeah. So in that case, the business was feeling stressed. So First Dollar was kind of a poster child of like raising a ton of money in the ZERP era, 2020, 2021. Everything's going great, kind of right up until things aren't, sort of 2024, 2025. Capital markets dry up. Business is growing, but not fast enough. And where I am as CEO is I'm pretty confident we're not going to raise a Series B, at least in the near future. We're going to have to figure out how to bridge it, cut back to stay alive, or maybe I can hustle up an acquisition based off people that I know. And I remember the sort of big deal we have been working on just falls through. And so I get this new piece of information, I'm kind of looking at the deck, and ultimately what I put together is set up a bridge strategy. So I had a default plan in the event that we needed it. But with that security, then went out and made a couple phone calls to some close relationships that we had to see if there might be a deal we could put together that would make sense for us and would make sense for them. And fortunately, we were able to do so.
Was this a group that you knew previously?
It was, yeah. So they weren't a customer of ours, but I had known them probably for 2.5 years. Multiple run-ins with leadership team across conferences, commercial visits where we were pitching our products. So they had a pretty good background on us. And that was really helpful because in order to put a deal together like this, particularly on a shortened time frame, I just don't know how to do it if you don't know someone for at least a year or two. It's really hard to get someone to move in the way that you need to if the first introduction is a cold call.
Well, let me ask you, you have a huge advantage because you're a known entity at this point, right? You built significant companies in significant industries, had great acquisitions. Now you got a great set of investors. So it's giving you kind of industry-wide visibility. I'm wondering how much of that led to this conversation of there's enough credibility when that first phone call is made. Do you think that weighs in, or could a founder first time be able to jump in and create the situation you did?
I'm sure that helps, but honestly, I think I just recommend boot and suspenders approach, or belt and suspenders approach, which is to say, like, if you're a CEO of a startup, it is pretty easy to work in obscurity. Like people just don't know you exist. And so spending a little bit of time as CEO, getting out in industry, introducing yourself, making sure folks know who you are, what you're working on. I don't think that needs to be more than 5%, guys. Like as you go to conferences, just take a little bit of time to think about who might buy this thing someday and how can I get to know them casually. That's it. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just letting them know who we are. That type of belt and suspenders work goes a long way, even as a first-time founder. And that's been like a consistent playbook for me, is just make sure people know who we are. That's it. We're doing cool stuff. Like they should know who we are. Like that by definition. Yeah, it's part of sales. And in fact, it's helpful. Like if you're an industry leader, you want to know what's hot and sexy in startup land. I'm doing you a favor by letting you know about it.
I like to think, right, obviously wasn't on the front lines with you, but your background, the success that you had built, even through the 21, 22 times, that probably led to somebody raising their hand and saying there's something really here. And obviously there was, because you said it's going to run a third of whatever transactions were run by First Dollar to begin with. So there really was real value, and maybe the market was what was really beating you up. I think one thing that I take away is we cannot time the market. These companies have these opportunities and people are knocking and strategic partners are saying we should do something bigger together. As entrepreneurs, we need to view our careers as a career. It is not trying to hit a grand slam and getting every last dollar and waiting 6 more months and 6 more months for perfection, because the market can turn. Like I said, it wasn't there. I think you're very fortunate that you had fostered these relationships to give you an out when you needed it. On a very viable company. What I'd love to shift to is maybe just like your words of wisdom, tying it all up. I mentioned the 5% time, which I think to me, because it couples with sales, feels like even more than that, right? In the back of your mind, could this be an acquirer for us? But yeah, please let me. I'll give the mic back to you. Share what you're thinking.
Yeah, I think so. A couple things come to mind. So first, if you're just starting a startup, venture backed or bootstrapped, I would say keep all of your focus on product market fit to start with. Like if you can't get something built that people are willing to pay for, has good metrics, like start there, because like acquisitions can happen for many reasons, but they are most likely to happen if you've actually built something valuable. So keep squarely focused on that. But as you start to peek past product market fit, maybe you're like post-seed, you're starting to raise, I would encourage a 5% thread on M&A. And the actual practice of this is really simple. I'm sure folks that are listening who are in venture-backed startups, you almost certainly have a fundraising pipeline. So it could be as simple as a spreadsheet, name, firm, last touch, stage, etc. I would encourage making a copy of that and just call it M&A pipeline. Delete all the rows and then just start populating company, person, last touch, why they might buy it. And your job is over a 5% allocation of energy, just casually fill that thing out. You'll have 2 years to do it. Doesn't have to be done all at once. And when you're at conferences, put some more names on the list. When you're out there doing sales, put some more names on the list. If you find yourself having a casual meeting with someone on that list, take the time to maybe ask a couple probing questions about strategy. Get a sense on, will they even buy something? Do they buy things? Like, what's the vibe over there? Super useful information, whether you're planning to sell or not, because even if your goal is, I'm just going to raise round after round after round and we're going to IPO, tell you what, having external M&A pressure on rounds actually helps you gets round rounds raised too. I mean, the core of all this, guys, is just optionality curation. So in the venture backed game, if you're not fortunate enough to just be default alive through cash flow, many of us aren't. Best thing you can do is cultivate optionality through M&A options as well as funding options. Like, keep the company alive. That's like your number one job.
Jason, how much of this is your acquisition engineering playbook, what you just described?
I say that's a core part of it. I would advocate the same for any founder that I might be coaching. And if I find myself in a venture backed business again, I think even if your default plan is shooting the moon, I think you owe it to yourself, your team, and your investors to keep a little tiny cron thread on where some outs might be along the way. There is great value creation, guys, in singles, doubles, and triples. Not everything has to be a grand slam. And if we optimize only for the grand slam, I could even start to argue at some point you're sort of doing a disservice to shareholders.
Jason, I think we could go on for hours. I know I could. This is fantastic. There's so much detail. You've been so successful. I really thank you for chatting with us. I would say that I hope everybody that was listening, I'm trying to be respectful of time here by closing it up. I hope this was helpful to you. We'll drop Jason's Exited Founder profile in the chat again. Please know that, as you can tell, Jason is in high demand. He can only help so many people with M&A this year. So if you're thinking about selling a business, please go over to Exitwise, click on Jason's profile. Jason has experience in so many different industries. So it really it talks, I think, very highly about there is a talent in M&A and a way to walk that path. And having a mentor like Jason on your team is going to make you marketably more successful. If Jason isn't the fit, because of industry, you can find somebody at Exitwise. We have over 100 people just like Jason that are ready to help people who are running businesses with M&A. So thank you, everybody, for listening today. Jason, really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing I would add, Todd, is for folks listening, even if you're not certain M&A is the right strategy, this year or next, I'm interested in, hanging out with you guys for a month or two, just to kind of, hey, what's current state? What are you thinking? How can we maybe design a little bit of a background thread just to sort of get a little bit of wheels in motion for perhaps when the time might be right? More than interesting to me. So please reach out.
Yeah, I want to echo that. The majority of people are not ready to sell. They're thinking about it in the next 6 months to 2 years. And there is some serious positioning that exited founders like Jason can help with to allow you to create the exit that you truly deserve. We can get rid of some of those red flags that might depress a valuation and open doors to acquirers that might not have been there previously. So yeah, great point. Jason, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. And we'll see you on the next one.
Cool. Thanks, folks. Be well.